There's something profoundly unsettling about the world of Bloodborne. Walking through the Gothic streets of Yharnam, past the towering architecture and the blood-soaked cobblestones, you feel an ever-present weight pressing down upon you. At first, you believe you're hunting beasts, cleansing a plague that has transformed the citizens into ravenous monsters. But as the pale moon hangs lower in the sky, as your insight grows and reality begins to peel away like rotting skin, you realize the truth. The beasts were never the real horror. Above you, around you, perhaps even within you, there exist beings so incomprehensible, so alien to human understanding, that merely perceiving them can shatter sanity like glass. These are the Great Ones, and their purpose in Bloodborne's world is as mesmerizing as it is terrifying. From Software's masterpiece doesn't hand you exposition on a silver platter. Instead, it scatters fragments of truth across item descriptions, whispered dialogue, and environmental storytelling. The Great Ones exist in the shadows of the narrative, their motivations obscured by the limitations of human comprehension. Yet when you piece together these fragments, when you follow the threads of blood and madness that connect every event in Yharnam's tragic history, a picture emerges. It's a picture of cosmic entities driven by an impossible yearning, of beings whose very existence defies the natural order, and of a purpose so fundamentally tragic that it has brought ruin to an entire civilization. The Great Ones are described as multidimensional beings, creatures that exist across several planes of reality simultaneously. They possess powers that seem like magic to human eyes, reality-warping abilities that allow them to create entire worlds within dreams, to manipulate time and space, to bestow terrible gifts upon those who seek their audience. The scholars of Bergenwerth called them gods, and perhaps they were right. But these are not benevolent deities watching over their creation with loving eyes. These are entities whose very presence corrupts, whose touch transforms, whose attention brings both enlightenment and destruction in equal measure. Understanding the Great Ones requires us to abandon our human perspective, to think in terms that evolution never prepared our minds to comprehend. In the Japanese version of Bloodborne, they are called Joisha, meaning superior ones, or beings of higher rank. This nomenclature captures something essential about their nature. They are not simply powerful creatures or ancient monsters. They exist on a fundamentally different level of reality, operating according to laws and logic that transcend human understanding. When you fight a Great One, you are not merely battling a boss. You are confronting a fragment of something vast and incomprehensible, something that has chosen to interact with our plane of existence for purposes we can barely fathom. The design of each Great One reflects this alien nature. Look at the moon presence, that skeletal, spine-like creature with tentacles where its head should be, lacking anything resembling a face or recognizable features. Consider Ebrietas, the slug-like being with squid tentacles and vestigial wings, her body a nightmarish fusion of marine biology and cosmic horror. Or Ram, that pitiful spider thing covered in bulbous growths that might be flowers or crystallized thoughts made manifest. None of these beings conform to earthly biology. They are abominations in the truest sense, creatures whose very existence seems to mock the natural laws that govern our world. Yet for all their power, for all their transcendent nature, the Great Ones are not omnipotent. They are not all-knowing, and perhaps most importantly, they are not immune to suffering. This is the great tragedy that defines their existence, the cosmic irony that drives every action they take in the world of Bloodborne. These godlike beings, these entities that can create nightmares and reshape reality, are cursed with an affliction that no amount of power can overcome. It is written in the description of the umbilical cord, that most crucial of items, in words that echo throughout Yharnam's blood-soaked history. Every Great One loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. This single truth unlocks everything, The beast plague that ravages Yarnum, the experiments conducted in the Grand Cathedral and the research hall, the hunter's dream that ensnares you from the moment you awaken on that operating table, the massacre at the fishing hamlet, the nightmare that torments the old hunters, the ritual conducted by the school of Mensis, even your own role as the hunter. All of it, every tragedy, every atrocity, every drop of blood spilled in this nightmare can be traced back to this one fundamental truth. The Great Ones cannot have children, and in their desperate attempts to overcome this cosmic sterility, they have brought ruin to humanity. But why? What purpose does this serve? Why would beings of such immense power be so fixated on reproduction? The answer lies in understanding that despite their transcendent nature, the Great Ones remain bound by certain fundamental truths. One of these truths, as described by Hidetaka Miyazaki himself in interviews about the game's design, relates to a biological principle. In nature, the more evolved and complex a species becomes, the fewer offspring it produces. Humans have far fewer children than insects. Large mammals have smaller litters than rodents. Intelligence and complexity come at the cost of reproductive success. The Great Ones represent the ultimate expression of this principle. They have evolved, ascended, transcended to such a degree that they can no longer reproduce naturally. Their children are born stillborn, or die shortly after birth, or perhaps are never truly born at all, existing only as formless consciousnesses unable to take physical shape. This is not a minor inconvenience for them. Based on their actions throughout Bloodborne's history, the loss of their children appears to be the defining trauma of their existence, the wound that never heals, the absence that drives them to increasingly desperate measures. Consider what this means for beings that can perceive multiple dimensions that exist across vast expanses of time and space. They witness everything, yet cannot create new life. They possess godlike powers, yet cannot fill the void left by their lost offspring. This paradox defines their purpose. The Great Ones are not here to conquer humanity or destroy the world. They are not motivated by malice or hunger for power. Instead, they are driven by something far more relatable and therefore far more tragic. They want what every living thing wants. They want to continue, to create, to leave something of themselves behind. They want children. This yearning for surrogates explains the sympathetic nature attributed to the Great Ones throughout the game. They are described as beings that answer when called upon, entities that will grant boons to those who pray to them. When Gehrman lost his beloved student Maria and fashioned a doll in her image, praying to the moon presence to bring it to life, the Great One answered. When the people of the fishing hamlet called upon Kos to curse the hunters who had massacred them, she listened even in death. The amygdala scattered throughout Yarnum perch on buildings and in hidden places, silent observers that some believe are there specifically to hear the prayers of their worshippers. This sympathy is not entirely altruistic. The Great Ones help humans because humans are essential to their purpose. Humanity represents their last, desperate hope for surrogacy, for creating offspring that might survive where their natural children cannot. But to understand how this surrogacy works, we must first understand the nature of the special infants that draw the Great One's attention. Throughout Bloodborne, we encounter references to special babies, children that are somehow different from normal human infants. These special babies act as lures to the Great Ones, drawing their attention and interest. But what makes a baby special? The game suggests several possibilities. It might be a matter of bloodline, the child of vile bloods, or Thumerians carrying ancient and powerful blood. It might be a matter of circumstance, infants conceived or born during specific celestial events like the descent of the blood moon. Or it might be something more esoteric, a quality that defies easy definition, but which the Great Ones can somehow perceive. Whatever the criteria, When a special infant appears, the Great Ones take notice, and when they take notice, terrible things happen. Oedon, the formless Great One, whose essence is blood itself, impregnates women through their blood. His influence spreads like a disease through Yarnum, targeting those whose blood is powerful enough to potentially birth a surrogate for him. Ariana, the woman of Vilabud heritage working as a courtesan, becomes pregnant without ever having physical contact with Oedon. The fake Iosefka, conducting twisted experiments in the clinic, also falls victim to his incorporeal touch. Queen Yarnum of the ancient Pythagorean civilization carried Mergo, a child conceived through similar means. The moon presence takes a different approach. Rather than directly impregnating humans, it creates the hunter's dream, an elaborate mechanism designed to cultivate a suitable surrogate through combat and blood consumption. Every beast you slay, every blood echo you absorb, every moment of violence and carnage brings you closer to transcendence. The moon presence is essentially farming you, nurturing your growth through an endless cycle of death and resurrection, hoping that you might develop into something worthy of replacing its lost child. This process is neither kind nor gentle. The umbilical cords you find throughout your journey, those precious relics that grant insight and open your eyes to the cosmic truth, are precursors to true umbilical cords. They come from infants that the Great Ones attempted to claim as surrogates, infants that died or were stillborn in the process. Each cord represents a failure, another child lost to the Great One's desperate attempts at reproduction. The cord from Mergo tells us that the school of Mensis's audience with this infant Great One resulted in the stillbirth of their brains. The scholars literally had their minds destroyed by contact with a being they could not comprehend. The cord from Ariana's infant notes that it was corrupted blood that began this eldritch liaison, suggesting that Oedon's very essence, flowing through her veins, created conditions for conception. The tragedy extends beyond just the Great Ones themselves. Their quest for surrogacy has created ripples of suffering throughout Bloodborne's world. The healing blood that forms the foundation of Yarnum's civilization, the miraculous substance that can cure any ailment and grant superhuman vitality, comes from the Great Ones. It is their blood, or more specifically, the blood collected from beings like Ebrietas, who cooperated with the healing church. This blood carries the potential for transcendence, for evolution beyond human limitations, but it also carries the beast scourge. The transformation into beasts is not random. It is a consequence of humanity attempting to harness the power of beings they cannot fully understand. The old blood, as it's called, comes from creatures that exist on a higher plane of reality. When humans imbibe this blood, they are essentially trying to force an evolutionary leap that their bodies and minds are not prepared for. Some, like the scholars of Bergenwerth, who lined their brains with eyes, sought enlightenment through more direct means. Others simply used the healing blood for its medicinal properties, unaware of the cosmic horror lurking within each drop. But the blood always has a price. Those who use it begin to change. Their bodies warp and mutate, taking on bestial characteristics. Their minds deteriorate, overwhelmed by bloodlust and violence. The line between man and beast blurs, just as the ancient lore notes describe. And when the blood moon descends, when the Great Ones draw close to the material world, this transformation accelerates. The hunt begins not because people choose to become beasts, but because the very proximity of the Great Ones to our reality causes this metamorphosis. This brings us to one of the most enigmatic Great Ones, Oedon, the Formless One. While other Great Ones possess physical bodies, however alien and incomprehensible they might be, Oedon has transcended even that limitation. He exists purely as voice, as consciousness, as influence. His essence is blood itself, the vital fluid that courses through every living thing. This makes him simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, present in every drop of blood, yet impossible to confront or comprehend directly. Oedon's influence pervades Bloodborne's narrative in ways both subtle and profound. His name appears in key locations. Oedon Chapel, that Gothic structure where you can send NPCs for safety, bears his name and sits adjacent to the tomb of Oedon, where Father Gascoigne met his tragic end. The Oedon Writhe rune, which allows you to replenish quicksilver bullets by performing visceral attacks, literally drawing ammunition from the blood of your enemies, references his nature as the Great One of Blood. Every time you perform a visceral attack, every time you thrust your hand into an enemy's body and tear out their life essence in a spray of blood, you are unconsciously performing a ritual aligned with Oedon's nature. But Oedon's most significant impact comes through his role as a father. He is explicitly identified as male, the only Great One given such a clear gender designation. And unlike other Great Ones who struggle with surrogate children dying or failing to develop properly, Oedon has managed to conceive multiple offspring. Mergo, the infant Great One whose cries echo through the nightmare of Mensis, is believed to be Oedon's child with Queen Yearn. The cosmic infant born from Ariana is another of his progeny. Perhaps others exist as well, scattered throughout Yearn's history, conceived through his blood-born touch. Yet even Oedon's children are not truly successful. Mergo exists as a formless consciousness, able to create nightmares and influence reality, but possessing no physical body, no tangible form. The child Ariana gives birth to is a slug-like abomination, a cosmic infant that shares none of its mother's humanity. These are not children in any meaningful sense. They are fragments of Oedon's power given independent existence, creatures that exist in the spaces between dreams and reality, neither fully Great Ones nor fully alive. The fact that Oedon, despite his formless nature and his power over blood, still cannot produce viable offspring reinforces the central tragedy of the Great Ones. Even the most powerful among them, even one who has transcended physical form itself, cannot overcome this fundamental curse, and this failure drives him to continue his attempts, to continue impregnating women across Yearn, to continue hoping that somehow, somewhere, one of these unions will produce a child that survives. While Oedon operates through blood and influence, the moon presence takes a more direct approach to creating a surrogate. This skeletal, tentacled horror is the architect of the hunter's dream, the twisted dimension where you awaken after each death, where the doll tends to your needs with mechanical devotion, where Gehrman sits in his wheelchair, trapped for eternity. Understanding the moon presence's purpose requires understanding the dream itself. Lawrence and Gehrman, founders of the first workshop of hunters, used an umbilical cord to make contact with the moon presence. This was not a random act of summoning. The cord itself, coming from a Great One's child, served as a perfect lure. The moon presence responded to this call, descending from the pale moon that gives it its name, and in exchange for the cord, it created the hunter's dream. This seemed like a beneficial exchange. The hunters gained immortality of a sort, the ability to resurrect after death, to continue fighting the beast plague without fear of permanent death. They gained a workshop filled with tools and weapons, a safe haven from the nightmare outside. They gained the doll, an entity that could channel their blood echoes into increased strength and abilities. But the cost was steep. Gehrman became bound to the dream, unable to leave, forced to guide countless hunters through their trials while never experiencing release himself. When you hear him muttering in his sleep, pleading, "Please, free me from this terrible dream," you're hearing the anguish of a man who has been the moon presence's prisoner for longer than he can remember. The dream is not a gift. It is a carefully constructed training ground, a crucible designed to forge a hunter worthy of becoming the moon presence's child. Every beast you slay feeds you blood echoes, the crystallized life force of the creatures you kill. These echoes are not simply experience points. They represent the accumulated vitality, the essence, the very being of your victims. When you consume them through the doll, You are literally absorbing this essence into yourself, growing stronger, evolving, transcending your human limitations. This is not so different from what the scholars of Bergenwerth attempted with their eyes, or what the choir attempted with their experiments. You are being forced to evolve, to ascend, to become something more than human. The moon presence watches your progress with patient interest. It has created a perfect selection mechanism. Weak hunters who cannot adapt will succumb to the beasts and choose to abandon the hunt when Gehrman offers mercy. Strong hunters who lack the insight to perceive the cosmic truth will complete the hunt and return to the waking world, never realizing the full extent of what they've experienced. But a hunter who is both strong enough to defeat every obstacle and insightful enough to consume 3 umbilical cords, thereby gaining eyes on the inside, as the saying goes, such a hunter transcends the moon presence's control. This transcendence is key to understanding the moon presence's purpose. In the normal ending, where you allow Gehrman to kill you, you wake up in Yharnam believing the nightmare is over. In the true ending, where you refuse Gehrman and kill him instead, the moon presence descends to claim you as its new host for the dream. But if you have consumed the umbilical cords, if you have achieved sufficient insight, you resist its embrace. You fight the moon presence itself. And if you win, if you manage to defeat this cosmic horror, you are reborn as an infant great one, a slug-like creature cradled gently by the doll as the dream burns around you. This ending is called childhood's beginning for a reason. You have become the moon presence's child, its surrogate, the first successful creation in what might be eons of failed attempts. Your transcendence represents the moon presence achieving its purpose. It has successfully cultivated a human into a being capable of surviving the transformation into a great one. The doll's gentle care of your infant form suggests that despite everything, despite the manipulation and the countless deaths and the horror of what you've become, there is something almost tender in this moment. You are the answer to the moon presence's yearning, the child that will not die or fade into nothingness. But this raises troubling questions. The moon presence specifically targets other great ones throughout your hunt. The lecture hall note states, "The nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, pale blood," followed by, "Hunt the great ones, hunt the great ones." Your journey takes you to defeat Rom, who hid the cosmic truth from humanity. It leads you to silence Mergo, whose crying drew the blood moon close. You can choose to fight the Orphan of Kos, another infant great one. Why would the moon presence command you to kill other great ones if it is simply seeking a child? The answer might lie in competition and jealousy. The great ones, for all their sympathetic nature, are not above conflict with one another. If multiple great ones are attempting to create surrogates from the same pool of special humans, they would naturally come into opposition. The moon presence might see other infant great ones as threats, potential competitors for resources or attention. By eliminating them, by having you destroy potential surrogates for other great ones, the moon presence ensures that you are the only successful transcendence, the only true child. Alternatively, the moon presence might be attempting to end the cycles that other great ones have set in motion. The beast plague, the nightmares, the various horrors that torment Yharnam, all of these can be traced back to great ones attempting to create surrogates through different means. By ending these cycles, by silencing Mergo and removing Rom's concealment, the moon presence might be trying to restore some kind of balance, even if that balance comes at the cost of other great ones' hopes for children. Whatever its exact motivations, the moon presence represents one of the most successful great ones in achieving its purpose. Where others have failed to create viable offspring, where Oedon's children are formless or monstrous, where Kos's orphan was killed before it could truly live, the moon presence has created a sustainable system for cultivating surrogates. The hunter's dream can theoretically continue forever, drawing in hunter after hunter, perfecting its selection process with each iteration. You might be the first successful transcendence, but you certainly won't be the last. Before the moon presence can achieve its purpose, before your transformation can occur, you must first remove an obstacle. Rom, the vacuous spider, hides in the depths of Byrgenwerth's moonside lake, surrounded by her smaller spider offspring, maintaining a barrier that conceals the true nature of reality from human perception. She is perhaps the most tragic figure in all of Bloodborne, a scholar transformed into a cosmic monstrosity, her mind wiped blank by the very knowledge she sought to obtain. Rom was once human. She studied at Byrgenwerth alongside Master Willem and others who sought to understand the Great Ones and achieve transcendence. The lore notes scattered around Byrgenwerth speak of her transformation. Mikolash, host of the Nightmare, explicitly prays to Kos, saying, "Ah, Kos," or some say, "Cosm, do you hear our prayers? As you once did for the vacuous Rom, grant us eyes, plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy." This tells us that Kos, one of the Great Ones, was directly involved in Rom's transformation, granting her the eyes on her brain that allowed her to perceive the cosmic truth. But the cost of this enlightenment was steep. Rom's transformation into a Great One, or more accurately, into a kin of the Great Ones, came at the price of her mind. She is called vacuous for a reason. Her intelligence, her personality, everything that made her human has been burned away by the cosmic knowledge forced into her brain. She sits in the lake, barely aware of her surroundings, only attacking when threatened. The notes at Byrgenwerth state, "The spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared." This suggests that her vacuousness might be intentional, a safeguard preventing her from sharing the terrible truths she perceives. Rom's purpose is to maintain the concealment, to hide the cosmic horrors that exist all around Yharnam. Before you kill her, the city appears relatively normal, at least by Bloodborne standards. Beasts prowl the streets, certainly, but the fundamental nature of reality seems intact. After Rom's death, everything changes. The blood moon descends fully, bathing the world in pale light. The lesser amygdala that were always present but invisible become visible to your eyes, crawling across building facades and lurking in unexpected places. The true scope of the cosmic horror infesting Yharnam is revealed. This concealment serves a purpose beyond simply hiding scary monsters from humans. Rom is preventing people from perceiving the proximity of the Great Ones, from realizing just how close these entities are to the material world. This concealment might actually be protective. The more aware humans are of the Great Ones, the more insight they gain, the more vulnerable they become to transformation and madness. By keeping the truth hidden, Rom is shielding humanity from knowledge that would destroy them. But her concealment also prevents the rituals and events necessary for the Great One's purposes. The School of Mensis needs the blood moon to fully descend to complete their ritual to commune with Mergo. Oedon needs the blood moon's presence to effectively impregnate women through their blood. The moon presence needs the hunt to continue, needs the cycles of death and resurrection to forge suitable surrogates. Rom's barrier interferes with all of this. From the perspective of the Great Ones, she is an obstacle that must be removed. Yet Rom herself is connected to the Great One's purposes in complex ways. Her transformation into a kin or quasi-Great One represents one attempt at creating what might be considered a surrogate or successor. Master Willem, who still sits in his rocking chair at Byrgenwerth overlooking the lake, seems to have been involved in this transformation. His entire philosophy centered on the idea that we are thinking on the basest of planes. What we need are more eyes. He believed that humans could achieve understanding of the Great Ones through insight, through literally gaining eyes inside their brains to see as the Great Ones see. Rom was his masterpiece, proof that humans could indeed be transformed into something greater. But she was also proof of the dangers of such transformation. Her vacant stare, her loss of self, her reduction to a creature of pure instinct and purpose, all of this demonstrates what happens when humans attempt to skip the natural evolutionary process and force themselves to ascend. She is neither human nor truly a great one. She exists in a liminal state, powerful enough to hide cosmic truths but mindless enough to be considered a failure. The corpse of another Ram-like creature found in the altar of despair beneath the Grand Cathedral suggests that there might have been multiple attempts at this transformation, or that Ram exists in multiple forms simultaneously. This body is much larger than Ram herself, with more developed limbs, suggesting either a more mature form or a failed earlier experiment. Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, kneels before this corpse when you first encounter her, seemingly mourning or perhaps praying. The connection between these spider-like beings and Ebrietas hints at deeper relationships between the various Great Ones and their attempts at creating or transforming life. Ram's purpose, then, is paradoxical. She was created to achieve enlightenment, to serve as proof that humans could transcend their limitations and become like the Great Ones. But in achieving this transcendence, she became an obstacle to the Great One's larger purposes. Her barrier must be broken for their plans to proceed, yet her very existence demonstrates that such transcendence is possible. She is both a success and a failure, a warning and an inspiration, a guardian and a prisoner. When you kill her, when you shatter the concealment she maintains, you are removing one of the last protections keeping humanity ignorant of the cosmic horrors that surround them. The ritual notes left after Ram's death instruct you to seek the nightmare newborn. This newborn is Mergo, whose crying can now be heard throughout Yharnam with sufficient insight. Ram's death allows the final phase of the hunt to begin, the journey into the nightmare of Mensis, where you will face Mergo's wet nurse and silence that harrowing cry. In this way, Ram's purpose was ultimately to delay the inevitable, to give humanity a few more moments of blissful ignorance before the cosmic truth crashed down upon them. While Ram represents a human transformed into something resembling a Great One, Kos represents a true Great One who made the fatal mistake of approaching too close to humanity. Her story is told primarily through the Old Hunter's DLC, through the nightmare-preserved fishing hamlet where her enormous corpse lies rotting on the shore, and through the orphan that explodes from her womb to attack you in a fit of rage and sorrow. Kos, or Cosm as some say, was a Great One who washed ashore at a small fishing village. The circumstances of her arrival are unclear. Some believe she was already dead when she beached, killed by unknown means. Others suggest she came to the village intentionally, drawn by the prayers of the fishermen who worshipped her as a deity. What is certain is that her presence transformed the village and its inhabitants profoundly. The people of the fishing hamlet revered Kos as their mother goddess. Her very presence caused mutations among them, transforming them into fish-like humanoids that still retained enough humanity to feel fear, pain, and devotion. The parasites that infested her corpse spread to the villagers, who welcomed this infection as a blessing from their goddess. This was not the beast transformation seen in Yharnam, driven by blood ministration. This was something different, a kind of evolution or adaptation caused by proximity to a Great One. The villagers became kin, creatures somewhere between human and cosmic entity. This symbiotic relationship might have continued indefinitely had the scholars of Byrgenwerth not learned of the village. Master Willem, Lawrence, Gehrman, and Maria, along with other hunters and scholars, descended upon the fishing hamlet. What happened next was described by Simon the Harrowed as a pitiful tale of petty arrogance. The scholars massacred the villagers. They dissected the corpses. They carved open skulls looking for eyes that had developed inside brains, seeking proof that contact with Great Ones could grant enlightenment. They violated Kos's corpse in ways the game mercifully doesn't fully detail, though it's strongly implied they removed her unborn child. The Orphan of Kos, that skinny humanoid horror wielding its own placenta as a weapon, represents one of the few genuine Great Ones born of another Great One rather than through surrogacy. But it was born under the worst possible circumstances, torn from its mother's womb by humans driven by scientific curiosity and religious fervor. The trauma of this violated birth echoes through the nightmare it creates, through every tortured cry it makes during your battle with it. Lady Maria, who served as one of the hunters during the massacre, was so traumatized by what occurred that she threw her beloved weapon, the rakuyo, into a well, unable to stomach its presence any longer. She eventually became a guardian of the secret, sitting before the clock tower that leads to the fishing hamlet, killing anyone who tried to access the truth. Her guilt consumed her so completely that even in the nightmare, even as a corpse reanimated by the curse, she continues to guard the passage, hoping perhaps to atone for sins that can never be forgiven. The curse that Kos laid upon the hunters, even as she died, or perhaps after she had already perished, created the hunter's nightmare. This nightmare is explicitly stated to have been born from the hunter's misdeeds, a cosmic punishment for their violation of the fishing hamlet. Every hunter who participated in the massacre, and indeed every hunter who came after them and inherited their bloodlust, is dragged into this nightmare upon death. They are forced to relive their violence, their cruelty, their descent into madness forever. The nightmare is populated by the ghosts of the old hunters, their weapons and armor still worn, their skills still sharp, but their minds lost to an eternal hunt that has no end. The fact that Kos was able to create such a powerful curse even in death speaks to the true nature of the Great Ones. They do not truly die, not as humans understand death. Their consciousness persists, their influence continues, their purposes are carried out even after their physical forms have been destroyed. The hunter's nightmare serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It punishes those who wronged Kos and her people. It preserves the memory of what happened, and it acts as a prison, keeping the most violent and corrupted hunters away from the waking world where they might do even more harm. Kos's purpose, then, appears to have been protective and nurturing toward the fishing hamlet's inhabitants. She gave them her blessings, her parasites, her presence. She transformed them into something more than human, though whether this transformation was truly beneficial is questionable. The fish-like villagers lived longer, perhaps, and possessed strange powers, but they also became completely dependent on their goddess. When she died, when the scholars came, they had no defense. Their goddess could not save them. Her curse could only avenge them after the fact. The Orphan of Kos represents one of the clearest examples of a Great One's child that actually survived, at least in some form. The creature you fight in the nightmare is both real and not real, a consciousness that manifests physical form through the power of the nightmare itself. When you finally kill it, when you strike down its ghost form that appears over Kos's corpse, the black phantom dissolves and returns to the ocean. The elderly fisherman NPC whispers in the ancient language, "Ah, sweet child of Kos, returned to the ocean. A bottomless curse, a bottomless sea, accepting of all that there is and can be." This dissolution into the ocean suggests that the orphan has finally been allowed to rest, to return to the cosmic realm from which it came. The sunrise that appears after the orphan's defeat, replacing the black moon that loomed over the fishing hamlet, indicates that Kos's curse has been lifted. The nightmare can begin to end. The hunters can find peace. But none of this erases what was done. The violation of Kos and her people stands as a permanent scar on Bloodborne's history, a testament to the catastrophic consequences that occur when humans interfere with the Great Ones. From the perspective of understanding the Great One's purposes, Kos demonstrates their vulnerability. Despite her power, Despite her ability to transform an entire village and to curse hunters across time and space, she could not protect herself or her child from human violence. Her purpose was to nurture and protect, to exist in harmony with those who worshipped her. But this purpose was thwarted by human ambition and curiosity. Her child was taken from her before it could truly be born, adding yet another tragedy to the endless cycle of great ones losing their offspring. Deep within the nightmare of Mensis, at the apex of the impossible architecture that defies Euclidean geometry, a crib sits overturned in a room that seems to exist outside normal space and time. No visible occupant rests within, yet if you have sufficient insight, you can hear a baby crying, that terrible sound that draws the blood moon closer and drives the school of Mensis's ritual. This is Mergo, perhaps the most mysterious of all the great ones, an infant that exists purely as consciousness without form. Mergo is believed to be the child of Queen Yearn, the ancient Pthumerian ruler whose spectral form appears throughout your journey, and Oedon, the formless Great One. This parentage makes Mergo unique among the Great One's offspring. Unlike the Orphan of Kos, who was born of two Great Ones, or the various surrogate attempts that involved human mothers, Mergo represents something in between, the child of a Great One and a human queen who herself possessed tremendous power and connection to the old blood. The description of Mergo's umbilical cord is particularly illuminating and tragic. It states that the school of Mensis used this cord to gain an audience with Mergo, but that this audience resulted in the stillbirth of their brains. The members of the school, including their leader Mikolash, sought to commune with a Great One infant to gain knowledge and power through this contact, but they were not prepared for what they encountered. The experience literally killed them, not physically, but mentally, destroying their consciousness and leaving them as shambling remnants, their bodies inhabited by something that is no longer quite human. Mergo's formless nature parallels Oedon's existence as a being without physical body. Both exist as voice, as consciousness, as influence rather than matter. This suggests that Mergo inherited this trait from Oedon, making the child perhaps the most successful of his offspring in terms of actually resembling the parent. But this formlessness also means Mergo cannot truly be said to be alive in any conventional sense. The child exists in the nightmare, sustained by the ritual of Mensis, crying endlessly for a mother who has been separated from them. Queen Yearn's behavior throughout the game reinforces this tragedy. Her spectral form appears at key moments, always associated with Mergo's presence. When you kill Rom and the blood moon descends, she appears in the moonside lake, her bloody dress suggesting birth or violent cesarean. She appears again outside Mergo's loft, gazing up at where her child is held. After you defeat Mergo's wet nurse and silence the infant's cries, Queen Yearn bows to you gracefully before vanishing. This bow has been interpreted various ways, some seeing it as gratitude for freeing her child from the nightmare, others as acknowledgement that you have completed your role in a cosmic drama she has long witnessed. Mergo's wet nurse itself is an enigma. This towering, six-armed figure with black wings and no visible head guards the infant with absolute devotion. The title wet nurse historically refers to a woman who breastfeeds and cares for another's child, typically when the biological mother is unable or unavailable. The presence of such a caretaker for Mergo suggests that the infant requires protection and nurturing even in its formless state. Various theories attempt to explain the wet nurse's origin. Some believe it was created by Mergo itself, a guardian conjured from the nightmare to protect the vulnerable infant consciousness. Others suggest it might be a Pthumerian servant, transformed into a cosmic horror to serve its queen's child. The theory that Mergo's wet nurse might be Viola, Father Gascoigne's wife, is particularly interesting. Viola's body disappears from the tomb of Oedon after the wet nurse is defeated, and the wet nurse responds to the tiny music box just as Gascoigne did, suggesting a connection to his family. If true, this would mean the Great Ones or the Nightmare transformed a human mother into a caretaker for Mergo, using her maternal instincts to ensure the infant's protection. The purpose of Mergo within Bloodborne's larger narrative is complex. The crying baby serves as the focal point for the nightmare of Mensis, the source of the madness that consumed the school. The cries draw the blood moon closer, intensifying the beast transformation throughout Yearn. Yet Mergo seems to pose no direct threat to anyone. The infant simply exists, crying for comfort or attention that can never truly be provided given its formless state. When you defeat Mergo's wet nurse, the crying continues for a moment, then transforms into gentle giggling or cooing before fading into soft snores. This change suggests that rather than killing Mergo, you have actually comforted the child, allowing it to return to sleep. The message, "Nightmare Slain," that appears references not Mergo itself, but the nightmare that the child's distressed state was maintaining. By bringing peace to this infant Great One, you have ended the cycle that was tormenting both the child and all those caught in its nightmare. Mergo's purpose, then, seems to be simply to exist, to be a child of a Great One. But the circumstances of Mergo's existence have been corrupted by the school of Mensis's interference and by Oedon's inability to properly nurture offspring. The infant was separated from its mother, trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by mad scholars who sought to use it for their own ends. Mergo's cries are the sound of a child that needs things it can never have: a physical body, a present mother, the ability to grow and develop normally. The tragedy of Mergo echoes the larger tragedy of all Great Ones: the inability to successfully create and raise children. Beneath the grand cathedral, at the bottom of a long elevator shaft that seems to descend into the very bowels of the earth, you will find the altar of despair. And at this altar kneels Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, before the corpse of a ram-like creature. She does not immediately attack. Instead, she remains in this position of mourning or supplication until you approach and provoke her. This scene alone tells a story of loss, devotion, and isolation. Ebrietas is described as the left behind one or the abandoned one in various translations and analyses. Unlike other Great Ones who seem to exist in higher planes or across multiple dimensions, Ebrietas remains in the physical world, accessible, almost tragically present. She was discovered in the Thumerian labyrinths by the Healing Church's elite choir faction, and rather than fleeing or resisting, she apparently cooperated with them willingly. This cooperation forms the foundation of the Healing Church's power. Ebrietas provided her blood, the old blood that allowed the Church to perform miraculous healings and grant extended life to its patients. She taught the choir members arcane secrets, allowing them to use hunter tools like the auger of Ebrietas and a call beyond. She served as a conduit between humanity and the cosmos, helping the Church make contact with the higher planes where other Great Ones resided. The entire upper echelons of the Church owed their power and knowledge to this single Great One, who, for reasons unclear, chose to help them. But why would a Great One cooperate so extensively with humans? The answer might lie in her abandonment. Ebrietas was left behind when other Great Ones departed for higher planes of existence. Whether this abandonment was intentional or circumstantial is unclear, but it left her alone, the only Great One that could be directly accessed and communicated with by the Healing Church. Perhaps she cooperated out of loneliness, seeking connection with any intelligent beings, even if they were limited humans. Perhaps she hoped that by helping the Church, she might facilitate human evolution into forms that could better understand and communicate with her. Or perhaps she saw humanity's attempts at transcendence as worthy efforts that deserved support, however dangerous they might prove. The ram-like corpse she kneels before adds another layer of tragedy to her story. This body suggests a connection between Ebrietas and the attempt to transform Ram into a great one. Whether Ebrietas was involved in Ram's transformation, whether they were related in some way, or whether Ebrietas simply mourns the loss of another being who attempted to bridge the gap between human and cosmic, we cannot know for certain, but the scene speaks to Ebrietas's isolation. Even surrounded by the healing church, even cooperating with the choir, she remains fundamentally alone, mourning losses that humans cannot fully understand. Ebrietas's purpose appears to be that of a teacher and benefactor. She shares knowledge, grants power, facilitates connection between realms. But this purpose has been corrupted by the healing church's ambitions. The blood she provided has led to the beast plague. The knowledge she shared has driven scholars to madness. The connections she facilitated have resulted in horrific experiments in the research hall, where patients were tortured in attempts to line their brains with eyes to grant them the insight necessary to perceive the cosmos. The celestial emissaries you encounter before reaching Ebrietas represent the choir's attempts to transform humans into beings like her. These blob-like creatures with their many eyes and their ability to use cosmic powers are neither human nor truly kin. They are failures, beings that were pushed too far too fast in an attempt to force evolution. The fact that Ebrietas allowed this experimentation, that she watched humans torture and transform other humans in her name, raises uncomfortable questions about her morality and the nature of the Great One's sympathy. Perhaps Ebrietas did not fully understand what the church was doing with her gifts. Perhaps she saw the suffering as regrettable but necessary for humanity's evolution. Or perhaps, as a Great One, she simply does not perceive suffering the way humans do. The cosmic perspective might make individual pain seem insignificant against the vast scope of existence. Whatever her reasoning, Ebrietas's cooperation with the healing church has had catastrophic consequences for Yharnam. When you defeat Ebrietas, she drops the Great Is chalice, opening access to deeper layers of the labyrinth where the land of Is can be found. Is described as lying in contact with the cosmos, a place where the boundaries between dimensions are thin. This chalice represents Ebrietas's final gift to those who would seek her level of understanding. But it is also a test. The depths of Is contain horrors that can destroy the unprepared. Those who descend seeking power and knowledge might find only madness and death. Ebrietas's purpose, then, is to serve as a bridge between humanity and the higher planes of existence. She is the teacher, the guide, the accessible Great One who does not hide behind veils of mystery and cosmic horror. But her accessibility has made her vulnerable. She has been used, manipulated, turned into a tool for human ambition. Her isolation, her abandonment by other Great Ones, has left her desperate enough for connection that she cooperated with beings who could never truly understand her. In this way, Ebrietas represents the dangers of the Great Ones attempting to help humanity. The gap between cosmic entity and mortal being is simply too vast. What seems like benevolent cooperation from one perspective looks like catastrophic enabling from another. Having examined the individual Great Ones and their actions, we can now synthesize their true purpose into a cohesive understanding. The Great Ones are not conquerors or destroyers. They are not actively malevolent, despite the horror and suffering that follows in their wake. Instead, they are beings driven by a single, overwhelming need that defines every action they take in Bloodborne's world. They yearn for children. This yearning stems from their fundamental nature. As beings that have evolved or ascended beyond normal biological limitations, the Great Ones have lost the ability to reproduce naturally. Their offspring are born dead, or die shortly after birth, or exist only as formless consciousnesses unable to properly experience existence. This creates an impossible situation. They possess godlike powers, but cannot do the one thing that every living organism is driven to do. They cannot continue their species. They cannot create lasting legacy. They cannot fill the emptiness left by their lost children. The tragic irony is that this sterility seems to be a direct consequence of their transcendence. Miyazaki's comments about the inverse relationship between complexity and reproductive success apply perfectly here. The Great Ones are so advanced, so powerful, so far beyond normal evolution that they have paid the ultimate price. They have become an evolutionary dead end. Their only hope lies in surrogacy, in finding beings from lower planes of existence that might be transformed or elevated into something capable of surviving as their children. This explains their sympathetic nature. The Great Ones are described throughout the game as beings that answer prayers, that grant boons, that respond to calls for help. This sympathy is not altruism. It is pragmatism mixed with desperate hope. By helping humans, by granting them power and knowledge, by responding to their prayers, the Great Ones are investing in potential surrogates. They are nurturing humanity, guiding evolution, hoping that some humans might prove capable of transcending their limitations and becoming suitable children. The blood ministration that forms the foundation of Yharnam's civilization is the Great Ones' primary tool for this nurturing. By sharing their blood with humans, they are essentially trying to force an evolutionary leap. The blood carries the potential for transcendence, the ability to develop eyes on the inside, to perceive cosmic truths, to eventually transform into something more than human. But this process is catastrophically dangerous. Most humans who use the old blood simply transform into beasts, their bodies and minds unable to handle the cosmic power flowing through their veins. They devolve rather than evolve, becoming monsters rather than ascended beings. The beast transformation is not a side effect or accident. It is the most common result of humanity attempting to harness Great One blood. The line between man and beast blurs because humans are being forced to change, to adapt, to become something other than what evolution intended. Most fail this test catastrophically. Their bodies warp into bestial forms. Their minds are consumed by bloodlust. They become the very monsters that hunters must slay, creating the endless cycle of violence that defines Yharnam's nights. But occasionally, rarely, someone succeeds. Ram achieved a form of transcendence, though at the cost of her mind. The celestial emissaries represent a step in the right direction. Beings that have incorporated enough cosmic power to develop abilities beyond human limitations, though they remain mindless and incomplete. The player character, given sufficient insight and strength, can complete the transformation fully, being reborn as an infant Great One that might one day mature into something truly cosmic. This rare success is what the Great Ones hope for. Every human they touch with their blood, every prayer they answer, every vision they grant, represents another chance, another possibility that this attempt might produce a viable surrogate. The suffering this causes, the beast plague, the madness, the death and horror, all of it is acceptable collateral damage from the Great One's perspective. They operate on a cosmic scale where individual lives, even thousands of individual lives, mean little compared to their desperate need for offspring. The various approaches taken by different Great Ones reflect different strategies for achieving this purpose. Oedon uses his formless nature to directly impregnate women through their blood, attempting to create hybrid offspring that might survive where pure Great One children cannot. The moon presence creates an elaborate selection and training mechanism in the hunter's dream, carefully cultivating hunters through combat and death until one proves worthy of transcendence. Kos attempted a more symbiotic approach, blessing an entire village and transforming its inhabitants gradually, allowing them to evolve naturally over generations into beings that might eventually ascend fully. Ebrietas takes the teacher's role, sharing knowledge and power with humans in hopes that some might use these gifts to elevate themselves. None of these approaches is entirely successful. Eden's children are formless or monstrous. The moon presence's chosen hunters typically fail to achieve transcendence. instead becoming trapped in the dream or returning to the waking world unchanged. Cass's village was destroyed before her plan could come to fruition. Ebrietas' students mostly go mad or transform into mindless kin. The Great One's purposes are thwarted again and again by the fundamental incompatibility between cosmic and human nature, yet they persist. This persistence itself tells us something crucial about their purpose. The Great Ones do not learn from their failures and stop trying. They do not give up on humanity despite countless disasters. Instead, they continue their attempts, modifying their approaches, trying new strategies, always hoping that this time, somehow, it will work. This behavior suggests that their need for children is not simply desire, but compulsion. They cannot stop trying any more than a drowning person can stop gasping for air. The interconnections between the various Great Ones' purposes add further complexity to this picture. They are not working together in some coordinated effort. Instead, each Great One pursues its own approach, sometimes interfering with or actively opposing other Great Ones' attempts. The moon presence commanding you to hunt other Great Ones suggests competition or conflict between them. Ram's barrier interferes with multiple Great Ones' plans simultaneously. The various nightmares, Mergo's and the hunter's nightmare, and the dream itself all exist as separate realms created by different Great Ones for different purposes, sometimes overlapping or conflicting. This lack of coordination suggests that the Great Ones, despite their power and their transcendent nature, are not unified beings working toward a common goal. They are individuals, each with their own personality, their own approach, their own desperate hope for children. They might sympathize with each other's plight, might understand that they all face the same curse of sterility, but this shared suffering does not lead to cooperation. Instead, it leads to competition for the same limited pool of potential surrogates. Humanity's role in all of this is simultaneously crucial and tragic. Humans are the raw material from which surrogates might be crafted, the lower life forms that might be elevated into cosmic significance. But they are also the victims of this cosmic drama, suffering and dying in vast numbers as the Great Ones pursue their purposes. Every person transformed into a beast, every scholar driven mad by insight, every hunter trapped in eternal nightmares represents the cost of the Great One's need for children. The truly horrifying realization is that humanity has no agency in this situation. The Great One's purposes will be pursued regardless of human suffering or resistance. You cannot negotiate with beings that exist across multiple dimensions. You cannot appeal to the mercy of entities that perceive time and space so differently from human experience. The best humanity can hope for is to become the thing the Great Ones want, to transcend and become surrogate children. But this transcendence requires abandoning humanity itself, becoming something alien and incomprehensible. The true purpose of the Great Ones, then, is continuation through transformation. They seek to perpetuate themselves by elevating lower forms of life into cosmic significance. This purpose drives every major event in Bloodborne's narrative, from the founding of the Healing Church to the creation of the Hunter's Dream, from the massacre at the fishing hamlet to the ritual of the School of Mensis. All roads lead back to this central truth. The Great Ones need children, and they will use humanity to create them, regardless of the cost. The attempts to create surrogates through direct intervention in human biology have produced the kin, those beings that exist in the horrifying space between human and Great One. Understanding the kin is essential to understanding the full scope of the Great One's purposes, because the kin represent the intermediate stages of transformation, the stepping stones on the path from mortal to cosmic. Kin are distinguished from beasts by their connection to cosmic power rather than bestial regression. Where beasts represent humanity failing to adapt to the old blood and devolving into monsters, kin represent humanity partially succeeding in ascension but falling short of full transcendence. They possess arcane abilities, resistance to physical damage, and often display signs of increased insight, such as multiple eyes or swollen heads filled with cosmic knowledge. But they remain trapped in twisted physical forms, unable to complete the transformation into true Great Ones. The celestial emissaries in the Grand Cathedral represent one of the most visible examples of kin creation. These beings were once human patients, likely brought to Yosefka's clinic or the research hall for treatment. Through exposure to Great One blood, likely from Ebrietas, and through surgical intervention that included attempts to line their brains with eyes, these patients were transformed into shambling creatures with crude cosmic powers. They can emit calls that summon meteors from the sky, demonstrating a connection to the cosmos that no human could naturally possess. But look at them closely. They are pitiful things, barely aware of their surroundings, moving with uncertain steps, their bodies awkward and malformed. They do not speak or show signs of intelligence. The transformation that was meant to elevate them has instead created something that is neither human nor truly transcendent. They exist in a state of arrested development, powerful enough to be dangerous, but not developed enough to be considered successful surrogates. The process of creating kin reveals much about the methods the Great Ones and their human collaborators use to force evolution. The research hall, accessible through the Old Hunters DLC, provides the most detailed look at these experiments. Here, in the rafters high above a tower filled with bizarre and disturbing experiments, patients were subjected to horrific procedures. Their heads were enlarged, their brains exposed to cosmic knowledge, their bodies altered in attempts to make them suitable hosts for ascension. The patients who survived these procedures became the enlarged head patients, beings with grotesquely swollen craniums that housed countless eyes developing inside their brains. They can see truths that drive normal humans mad, perceive the cosmos and its inhabitants, and use limited arcane powers. But the cost of this sight is complete loss of their humanity. They shamble through the research hall, moaning in distress, their minds overwhelmed by perceptions they cannot process. Lady Maria, who guarded the entrance to the research hall and the fishing hamlet beyond, understood the horror of these experiments intimately. Her dialogue suggests she bears tremendous guilt for her role in whatever occurred here. The patients she was meant to protect became subjects for cosmic experimentation. The healing that was promised transformed into torture in the name of transcendence. This betrayal haunts her even in the nightmare, making her one of the most tragic figures in Bloodborne's world. The Garden of Eyes enemies represent another approach to creating kin. These creatures, found in the Nightmare Frontier and other locations, appear to be humans who have undergone a complete biological transformation. Their bodies have been entirely replaced by masses of eyes and grasping tendrils. They can see in all directions simultaneously, perceive things that should be invisible, and attack with surprising coordination despite their grotesque forms. Yet they too seem to be failures, trapped in monstrous bodies, unable to achieve true transcendence. Brain suckers, those insect-headed horrors that drain your insight when they grab you, represent yet another form of kin. They appear to be humans who have been infected with or transformed by phantasms, those slug-like invertebrates that serve as conduits to the cosmos. The phantasm has essentially taken over the human body, creating a hybrid creature that feeds on the insight of others, perhaps attempting to accumulate enough cosmic knowledge to complete its own transformation. What unites all these various forms of kin is their incomplete nature. They have progressed beyond humanity, but fallen short of becoming great ones. They exist in a liminal state that is defined more by what they lack than what they possess. They lack true consciousness, or at least consciousness as we understand it. They lack full control over their abilities. They lack the transcendent nature that would allow them to exist across multiple planes. They are stuck in physical bodies that are warped and tortured by the cosmic power flowing through them. From the Great One's perspective, these kin might represent partial successes. They prove that humans can be transformed, that the gap between mortal and cosmic can be bridged, at least partially. Each failure teaches something about the process, refines the methodology, brings the Great Ones closer to understanding how to successfully create surrogates. But from the human perspective, the kin represent the ultimate horror. They show what awaits those who seek transcendence without sufficient preparation, who attempt to force evolution before they are ready, who accept the Great One's gifts without understanding the price. The connection between the kin and the Great One's purposes becomes clear when you consider the progression from human to beast to kin to Great One. This is not a single path, but a branching tree of possibilities. Most humans who contact the old blood become beasts, failing the test entirely. Some, through chance or exceptional qualities, begin the transformation toward kin, developing cosmic connections and abilities. Very few of these successfully complete the transformation to become true Great Ones. And perhaps only one, the player character in the right ending, achieves full transcendence. This progression reveals the true scale of the Great One's purposes. They are not trying to create a single surrogate child. They are attempting to cultivate an entire new generation of Great Ones from humanity. The blood ministration, the experiments, the nightmares, all of it serves as a vast evolutionary pressure, forcing humanity to adapt or die. Those who adapt might eventually transcend. The rest become beasts or kin, tragic failures littering the path to successful transcendence. But this raises a troubling question. If the Great Ones are trying to create a new generation of their kind from humanity, what happens if they succeed on a large scale? What happens if multiple humans successfully transcend? Would they join the existing Great Ones in the cosmic realm? Would they compete with them for resources or worship? Or would they replace the current Great Ones entirely, becoming a new pantheon of cosmic entities born from human stock? The ambiguity of these questions reflects the essential mystery of the Great One's true purposes. We can observe their actions, note their patterns, understand their immediate goals, but their ultimate endgame, the final purpose behind all this cosmic horror, remains obscured. Perhaps even the Great Ones themselves do not know where this will lead. Perhaps they are simply following the same biological imperative that drives all life to reproduce, to continue, to create offspring, without fully understanding what the consequences of success would be. What we can say with certainty is that the purpose of creating kin serves the Great One's larger goal of cultivating surrogates. Each kin, however failed or incomplete, represents another experiment, another data point, another step toward understanding how to successfully transform humans into cosmic beings. The horror of the kin is the horror of the Great One's purposes made manifest. They show us what it costs to catch the attention of beings that exist beyond human comprehension. Standing at the end of this investigation into the Great Ones and their purposes, we can see how every element of Bloodborne's narrative connects to their fundamental need for children. The game's plot is not about hunting beasts or uncovering conspiracies, though these elements exist. At its core, Bloodborne tells the story of cosmic entities attempting to overcome an existential crisis through any means necessary, and of the human civilization caught in the crossfire of their desperate attempts. The cycle begins with contact. A Great One becomes aware of humanity, either through prayers offered, rituals performed, or simply through proximity. This contact allows the Great One to extend its influence into the human world. Blood is shared, either literally through the old blood that forms the basis of Yharnam's healing practices, or metaphorically through visions, knowledge, and cosmic insight granted to receptive minds. This blood and knowledge transforms humanity. Some are driven mad by revelations they cannot process. Some transform into beasts, their bodies and minds unable to handle the cosmic power flowing through them. A rare few begin the ascension toward becoming kin, developing abilities and characteristics that bridge the gap between human and cosmic. And vanishingly rare individuals successfully complete the transformation, being reborn as infant great ones that might, given time, mature into beings comparable to their cosmic parents. Throughout this cycle, the great ones watch and wait. They cannot directly force the transformation. The process requires something from the human side as well, some quality of will or insight, or perhaps simply genetic luck that determines whether an individual will succeed or fail. The Great Ones can create conditions favorable for transcendence. They can offer blood and knowledge. They can construct elaborate mechanisms like the hunter's dream to cultivate and test potential surrogates. But they cannot guarantee success. This limitation reveals something profound about the Great Ones. Despite their power, despite their transcendent nature, they remain subject to rules and limitations they cannot overcome. They cannot simply create children through force of will. They cannot transform humans directly without the humans' participation in some form. They are powerful, but not omnipotent, knowledgeable, but not omniscient, sympathetic, but not truly benevolent. They are, in their own alien way, desperate. The suffering this desperation causes is immeasurable. Yharnam has been consumed by the beast plague, its population transformed into monsters. The healing church, founded with noble intentions to help humanity, has become a factory for creating kin and conducting horrific experiments. The hunters, meant to protect people from beasts, have become trapped in eternal nightmares or bound to the dream, unable to find peace even in death. The fishing hamlet was massacred, its people violated in the name of understanding the Great Ones. The school of Menses destroyed itself, attempting to commune with an infant Great One. Every corner of the game world bears scars from the Great One's purposes, yet the Great Ones continue. They do not stop their attempts. They do not learn to accept their sterility and find meaning elsewhere. Perhaps they cannot. Perhaps their need for children is so fundamental to their nature that abandoning this purpose would be equivalent to death. Or perhaps they see no alternative. They have tried everything they can imagine, and humanity represents their last, best hope for continuing their existence in any form. The player character's journey through Bloodborne mirrors humanity's relationship with the Great Ones in miniature. You begin ignorant of cosmic truths, focused on the simple task of hunting beasts. As your insight increases, as you consume the blood of your enemies and grow stronger, you begin to perceive things that were always there but hidden from your awareness. Lesser amygdala clinging to buildings, the true nature of the moon hanging in the sky, the cosmic significance underlying events you thought you understood. By the end, if you have consumed the umbilical cords and gained sufficient insight, you understand that you were never simply a hunter. You were a potential surrogate, being tested and cultivated by the moon presence. Every beast you killed fed you blood echoes that elevated you closer to transcendence. Every death and resurrection in the dream reinforced your separation from normal humanity. The entire hunt was a selection mechanism, and you passed the test. Your transformation into an infant Great One in the true ending represents the culmination of all the Great One's purposes throughout the game. You have successfully transcended human limitations and been reborn as something new. You are the child the moon presence yearned for, the surrogate that survived where countless others failed. This is presented as a victory, as childhood's beginning, the start of a new phase of existence beyond mortal comprehension. But is it truly a victory? You have lost your humanity, your memories, your identity. You have become an infant cosmic slug, cradled by the doll as the hunter's dream burns around you. You may grow into a Great One of tremendous power, but you will also inherit the curse that afflicts all Great Ones. You will lose any children you attempt to create. you will yearn for surrogates of your own. The cycle will begin again, with you in the role of the desperate cosmic entity seeking to overcome sterility through any means necessary. This cyclical nature suggests that the Great One's purposes are ultimately futile. Even if they succeed in creating surrogates, even if they manage to produce a new generation of Great Ones from human stock, these new beings will face the same curse. They too will lose their children. They too will be driven to seek surrogates from whatever lower life forms they can find. The tragedy continues across generations, across species, across dimensions. Perhaps this is the ultimate truth behind the Great One's purposes. They are not seeking to perpetuate themselves forever. They are simply trying to delay the inevitable. Every surrogate represents a temporary victory against extinction, a brief continuation before the curse reasserts itself. The Great Ones are fighting a losing battle against the consequences of their own transcendence, and they know it. But they fight anyway, because the alternative is acceptance of their ultimate sterility and meaninglessness. In this light, their actions toward humanity take on a different cast. They are not malevolent conquerors or indifferent gods. They are desperate survivors, grasping at any possibility for continuation. The horror they inflict is not intentional cruelty, but inevitable consequence. When beings that exist across multiple dimensions attempt to interact with beings bound to a single plane of existence, catastrophe follows not through malice, but through fundamental incompatibility. The true purpose of the Great Ones, then, is survival through transformation of the unwilling. They seek to perpetuate themselves by transforming humans into surrogates, regardless of whether those humans desire such transformation. They pursue this purpose with single-minded determination, unable or unwilling to consider the suffering they cause. And they will continue pursuing this purpose long after Yharnam has fallen, long after the hunter's dream has faded, because they have no alternative. They must continue or accept extinction. This is what makes the Great Ones so profoundly disturbing. They are not evil in any conventional sense. Their purposes are not malicious. Yet the consequences of their actions are catastrophic for humanity. They represent a cosmic horror that is immune to morality, to justice, to any human system of ethics. You cannot reason with their need for children any more than you can reason with gravity or entropy. The Great One's purposes simply are fundamental forces of the Bloodborne universe that humans must navigate as best they can. The only comfort, if it can be called that, is that the Great Ones are not unopposed. Humans can resist transformation. They can refuse to seek the blood, reject the old blood's gifts, choose to remain ignorant of cosmic truths. This ignorance comes at a cost, the inability to perceive reality fully, but it also provides protection. Those who never gain eyes on the inside never see the lesser amygdala. Those who never consume umbilical cords cannot be directly manipulated by the moon presence. Ignorance may be limiting, but it is also safe. Yet the game rewards those who seek knowledge, who pursue transcendence, who dare to look beyond the veil of comfortable illusion. The best ending, childhood's beginning, requires you to consume the umbilical cords, to gain maximum insight, to see the world as it truly is. This suggests that Bloodborne ultimately argues for engagement with cosmic horror rather than avoidance. The Great One's purposes may be terrible. The cost of transcendence may be your humanity itself. But the alternative is to remain forever ignorant, forever limited, forever prey to forces you cannot understand. This creates an impossible choice, which is perhaps the point. The Great Ones offer transcendence at the cost of everything that makes you human. Refusing their offer keeps you safe, but condemns you to ignorance and limitation. There is no good option, no pure victory. Every choice carries profound costs. This moral ambiguity, this refusal to provide easy answers or comfortable conclusions, defines Bloodborne's approach to cosmic horror. The Great One's purposes echo through every aspect of the game, from the smallest item description to the grandest boss battle. Understanding these purposes does not make the horror more palatable. If anything, comprehension increases the dread because you realize how utterly alien and unstoppable these beings are. You realize that Yharnam's fall was inevitable from the moment humanity first made contact with the cosmos. You realize that your transformation was planned from the moment you first awoke in the hunter's dream. But this understanding also grants a kind of peace. The events of Bloodborne are not random, not meaningless chaos. They follow from the Great One's desperate need to overcome their sterility. Every tragedy serves this purpose. Every horror contributes to their goal. The world may be cruel and incomprehensible, but it operates according to principles, however alien those principles might be. And understanding these principles allows you to navigate the nightmare with purpose rather than blind stumbling. If you've made it this far through this exploration of the Great Ones and their purposes, thank you for joining me on this journey into cosmic horror. Bloodborne rewards close examination and deep thought, revealing layers of meaning that become apparent only through careful analysis of its deliberately cryptic storytelling. The Great Ones remain mysterious despite our investigation, their full nature forever obscured by the limitations of human comprehension. But we have illuminated their purposes as best we can, traced the threads of their desperate yearning through every corner of Yharnam, and come to understand why the world of Bloodborne is the nightmare it is. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore, I would appreciate if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. There is so much more to explore in Bloodborne and other games that tell their stories through fragments and implications. Together, we can uncover the secrets hidden in the shadows, piece together the truths that developers scatter throughout their worlds, and gain insight into the cosmic horrors that lurk just beyond human perception. May the good blood guide your way, and may you find your worth in the waking world. Or perhaps, if you dare to consume the umbilical cords and resist the moon presence, you might find your worth in something far more transcendent and terrible. The choice, as always, is yours to make. But remember that every choice in Bloodborne comes with costs beyond imagining, and the Great Ones are always watching, always waiting, always yearning for children they can never truly have. The hunt continues, Hunter, and now you understand what you are truly hunting for.